God, it's got to be brutal to be an Arkansas fan in 2025. Tweeted this out. They have 4 games this year, all losses, with a post-game win expectancy of 60% or greater. Just a reminder, folks, they have 2 wins. I wonder if they've taken one too many punches, and are they prime for a no-show at some point. Texas, on the other hand, is a team where you're wondering where their mental is at. After losing last week to Georgia West, they've got Texas A&M on deck. Spread is 8.5 on ABC. Longhorns hosting Woo Pig Sooie.
This is VSiN's College Football Betting Podcast.
Welcome in another edition of the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast. I am your host, Tim Murray, and joined today, no, it is not Wednesday. It is Thursday. It is the breakdown of the card. Wes Reynolds joins us here as we did a little switcheroo this week. We had Matt on Wednesday, so check out that podcast as Matt gave out his favorite plays. And today, I was going to say Indiana brother, but I'm not from Indiana. I just like Indiana, and I like Notre Dame. So it is Wes Reynolds. Mr. Reynolds, how are you, sir, as we embark in Week 13 of the college football season?
It's all the same family in the Hoosier State, Tim. Indiana, much needed bye week, by the way, to get healthy and get geared up. So we always say, hey, it's bucket week. It's bucket 2 weeks, as a matter of fact, because they will not play till Black Friday against Purdue. Well, they will try to wrap up a 12-0 season.
Unique week. There's a lot of big spreads out there. There's a lot of situational spots, which, kind of worked out well. Matt likes the situational spots too, but you and I really dive into those look-aheads, those letdowns, sandwiches, all of that. So we got a lot to get into. So let's not waste any more time. Let's jump right into it with the biggest games of the week.
The main course.
And that is very apropos, as we will all be sitting down for a main course meal in 1 week on Thanksgiving. And let's jump into a game. Neither one of us have a bet on this one as of yet, but you got number 15 USC at number 7 Oregon. This will be where College Game Day is headed, 3:30 on CBS. And right now you've got Oregon at about a 9.5-point spread. You've obviously seen Oregon up close and personal. You went and saw them play against your beloved Hoosiers. What do you make of this spot on Saturday afternoon at Autzen Stadium?
Yeah, I'm right at the number here in terms of the spread, 9.5 or 10. I think that's fair. Both of these teams have kind of had their scoring decompressed, if you will, because they've been in some nasty weather conditions. Oregon, especially a couple weeks ago against Wisconsin. USC, it poured down rain there in the Coliseum, so low-scoring game against what is usually a good defense in Iowa. But Oregon, look, all the metrics, all the stats, say how good they are offensively. Number 1 in yards per game, number 1 in the yards per play margin as opposed to their opponent on any given week. But the thing with Oregon is that they don't have a marquee win yet this season. So this is almost like a little bit of a loser leave town match. I think the loser is definitely out of the playoff here. Even if Oregon just has the 2 losses, I think that they're going to be out. Better defense here than USC. Oregon, I think, has the ability to get stops and get you 3 and out. USC, you'll see drives continue with some, I think, pretty pedestrian offenses throughout the season. So the defense has kind of been average for USC. So I haven't decided on a side and I think I may sit out because I think I'm right at the number 9.5, 10. But over 59 seems like that might be a play to me because I think USC can get theirs. And because of the rain that we've had where the offensive numbers have been down for these teams over the last week or two, that's where I think maybe we're getting a little smidge of value in the total. So over 59, I even see a 58.5 somewhere out there. So anything around there, I go over USC Oregon.
Lincoln Riley on the road, we know how much he struggled as a favorite. If you just look at all of the games they've played away from home in his tenure at USC, 6-13 against the spread, 3-1 ATS as an underdog. Now, it is worth noting, 2022 against Utah, 3-point dog, lost by 1. 2023, 2-point dog at Notre Dame, lost by 4 touchdowns. 2023, Oregon, they were a 15-point dog. They ended up losing that game by 9. And then earlier this year, number close 10.5, 11 against Notre Dame. They lost by 10. So 0-4 straight up. Haven't pulled off the upset as a road underdog yet. No play for me, but obviously massive when it comes to the college football playoff. And if USC were to pull off this upset, where they would ultimately land next week in those rankings. Let's go earlier in the day. And last week, we saw Oklahoma pull off a massive win and really put themselves in the driver's seat to make the college football playoff. Number 8, Oklahoma, hosting number 22, Missouri. This will be noon on ABC, Wes. And when you look at this total, one of the lowest totals on the board this week, and makes sense. Both teams very strong defensively. No Bo Pribula, more than likely, even though there's some thoughts maybe he could give it a go off that ankle injury. Total 41.5, 42. 7.5's mostly out there in the market. 8 at Circa. Anything you're looking at here in this one in the land of Boomer Sooner?
Yeah, we had the Sooners last week, and they got fortunate for us. And maybe I call them the Oklahoma Steelers, like the Steelers of old, because they won like the Steelers would do, where they get outgained by a bunch, but then they win the turnover battle. Yep. And they were +3 in the turnover battle, even though they got doubled up in yards. I think Oklahoma barely had over 200 yards. So there's a part of me, Tim, that wants to take Missouri here. Just off of that, where Oklahoma was the big riser up the charts, like the hot shot on Casey's Top 40 back in the day, where they were zooming up the charts in terms of the poll rankings. But so this is kind of the spot where it's like, okay, this is where they come down. They won maybe a little bit of a deceptive win last week, but with Missouri, I don't know what their state is. They're 7-3, still a very solid season, but obviously their playoff aspirations are done. They could still get into a good bowl game, but is Eli Drinkwitz going to be one of those on the coaching carousel leaving? So there's always those thoughts that creep in and whatnot. So that's why I'm going to stay off the side. I would lean total here, even under 42. I think that this is going to be, this strikes me maybe as like a 20-10 type of game, where Oklahoma's defense gets turnovers and they get stops and have the ability to get you off the field, even on 4th and shorts, where it's like, okay, the defense is at a real disadvantage. They find ways, and they found ways against Alabama, stopped them on 4th and short a couple times last Saturday. So under for me, if I do anything. I'm right at the number, though, in terms of the side.
Yeah, I did take 8, which is still out there at Circa. Obviously, if you don't have access to Circa, 7.5 is fine. I'm going to be with Missouri here. Do I feel great about it? No. When you look at the defense that Oklahoma has, but you mentioned it. 212 yards of offense last week, a post-game win expectancy of less than 5%. We discussed this earlier in the week. How about scoring drives of 23 yards, pick 6, 31 yards, 41 yards, 22 yards? John Mateer still dealing with that thumb injury, wrist injury. He's getting better. He's, a gamer. He'll make some plays. Mm-hmm. Can Ahmad Hardy get some success on the ground? That's the concern here. He did not have a ton of success against Alabama. Obviously, last week, 300 rushing yards in the win against Mississippi State. But I do think this is a little bit of a letdown spot for Oklahoma here, as you alluded to, number 8 in the polls. All they got to do is win out. They're making the college football playoff, probably hosting a college football playoff game. So I thought about splitting the unit and doing half under and half on the side. For betting purposes and grading purposes here on the show, I'll be Missouri +8. You look at these two defenses, they're as good as you could imagine. Top 15 in most metrics for Missouri. Our buddy Brett Ciancia, opponent adjusted per play. Missouri's defense 12th amongst Power 4 teams. Oklahoma 3rd. So should be a rock'em sock'em match. And I'm hoping that early start time, maybe a little bit sleepy down there in Norman. So I will take the points here with Missouri because it's college football. Things get weird, and I don't expect things to be all that easy. Speaking of things getting weird, let's go to Gainesville, and it has nothing to do with Ole Miss and who could be their coach. Maybe he'll be headed to Florida. We got the Gators against Tennessee, and 2 weeks ago, you and I both were on Big Blue Nation, and we wish they were all that easy. And then last week, this point spread was fascinating to me, as Florida got as big as a 17-point underdog at Ole Miss, closed around 11.5, and they were winning the game going into the fourth quarter. So Wes, 7:30 on ABC. Florida right now around a 4-point underdog against old Rocky Top there in Gainesville.
Yeah, and I think things do get weird here. I like the Gators actually in this spot. And if you look, this has been a one-sided rivalry. You would expect it would be on the Tennessee side, but it's been on the Gator side. 17-3 over the last 20 seasons, including 10-0 at home down there in the Swamp. Gators always good as home underdogs too. I think over the last 10 years, 11-2 against the number as a home conference underdog. And I wonder about Tennessee, like. Their playoff hopes, for all intents and purposes, are over as well. And I think that they've been a little fortunate in a couple of the games. They were very fortunate to get by Mississippi State. They were very fortunate to hang on against Arkansas, whereas the Gators have had all kind of bad luck this year. They were in the game last week against Ole Miss, despite the fact that they mailed it in against Kentucky. So you're like, oh, they're going to do it again. And they didn't. They were right in the game there until the end. And, of course, against Georgia, I know Gunnar Stockton went down at the 1 and whatnot, and people were like, oh, it was a bad beat. They should have covered. The Gators, I think, should have won the game, to be honest with you. A couple questionable calls against them, including the one on the previous drive that led to that final drive for Georgia. But I think Florida is going to give it a go here. I know that they've got 7 losses, and they're not going to go to a bowl game, but this is a rival. They look like they're getting a couple guys back. They might get Caleb Banks back on that defensive line. So the fact that you've got somebody that's a potential first-round draft pick and he might be coming back after he's missed most of the season tells you that there's still some investment in playing hard, I think, for Florida. Florida is going to be able to run, I think, on Tennessee, and that's what they need to do. And that's what they do their best is run blocking. Don't always protect the quarterback that much, and Tennessee can get after the quarterback. But yeah, I'm going to be on the Gators here. I don't think Tennessee should be favored by more than 3. They should be favored, but they should be like 2.5 or 3, and you're getting 4.5 because the Gators are essentially done for the season. But they got 2 rivals at the end of the year here: Tennessee, and then of course Florida State Thanksgiving weekend. I think Florida continues to play hard, so. Go Gators.
Billy Gonzalez looking for his first win as the interim at Florida. He is 2-1 though against the spread. It always reminds me of the classic Steve Spurrier line, you can't spell citrus without UT.
I kind of miss Spurrier, man. Spurrier's got to be doing some kind of like TV work or something, man.
Oh,
with
he's
these gems.
He's got a podcast, I think.
Okay.
So his quotes pop up from time to time. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll get into some spicy matchups on the other side. Arkansas, the most ravaged and painful losses of the year. We'll dive into their game. Will they be live down in Austin after Texas's loss last week? It is the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast. All right, we're back. It is the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast. Wes Reynolds riding with me here on this Thursday. Matt Youmans already gave out his plays. Just a common play to note, both Wes and Matt on Florida, the Gators, chomp down there on Saturday night. We'll do our best bet recap as we always do to close out the show, Wes. But we always like to talk about the big matchups, but sometimes those matchups that are just a little bit off the radar, we like to call those ones the spicy ones.
Muy caliente! Spicy matchups.
Yes, those spicy matchups as we head into week 13. BYU at Cincinnati, primetime game, Fox, 8 p.m. You've got BYU coming off of their impressive win a week ago against TCU. The market bet against them, and they were wrong because TCU really no-showed in that game. And speaking of no-shows, Cincinnati, a tough one last week against Arizona. Can't remember if you were on that. I know our buddy, the Bear, Chris Felica, had the Wildcats in that one. But one thing that I like to notice and point out, Wes, is what was the look-ahead line and what is it now? The look-ahead line was 3.5 in favor of Cincinnati, and now BYU is the road favorite. Any thoughts on this one on Saturday night where BYU laying a little number, 2.5 at Cincinnati?
I haven't done anything with this one yet, but man, doesn't 2.5, based on what we've seen in terms of the recency bias that could be within the line, doesn't that seem like a small number for BYU? After they boat race TCU, they recover from that butt kicking they took down in Lubbock against Texas Tech. Meanwhile, Cincinnati gets upset by the Arizona Wildcats at home, and Cincinnati has been very good at home in conference play. And now all of a sudden it's not quite 3. It's 2.5 with some juice at a lot of places. That scares me a little bit. If I'm a BYU backer, to be quite honest with you, probably would lean over here at 55.5. Cincinnati, explosive offense, but they can be scored on defense. And I think BYU, Bear Bachmeier, can make plays. We know BYU can run the ball. We know they're disciplined. We know that they don't make a lot of mistakes here. So nothing on the side for me with BYU. BYU was only laying 3 at home last week to TCU, and now they're about right that spot at Cincinnati, who just got beat by Arizona. Boy, that I don't believe in the term trap. I think a lot of bettors use that. I don't think this is a trap. I think this is the price that the market bears. It's just surprising that maybe it's a little bit low, because I think the market is going to come in on BYU. If you're waiting on a 3, I think you may get it here with Cincinnati. So wait on it if you want to bet that. But over or nothing for me in this one.
Yeah, and you look at Cincinnati, could be getting some health back, which would be positive for them. I bet against BYU a couple times. I stayed off last week, thankfully. That was a nightmare of a performance. But one thing that I have not stayed off of, Wes, is Arkansas. I can't get enough of betting some Arkansas. Good God, it's got to be brutal to be an Arkansas fan in 2025. I tweeted this out. It is just remarkable. They have 4 games this year, all losses, with a post-game win expectancy of 60% or greater. Their second-order wins per SP Plus are 5.62. Just a reminder, folks, they have 2 wins. So this season has been rough. I stated last week that I have an Arkansas problem. We got to the window thanks to Harlem Berry making the right decision and sliding down late in that game. I have not bet this game, though, yet. I wonder if they've taken one too many punches, and are they primed for a no-show at some point. Texas, on the other hand, is a team where you're wondering where their mental is at. After losing last week to Georgia, West, they've got Texas A&M on deck. Spread is 8.5, 9, 3:30 on ABC. Longhorns hosting Woo Pig Suey.
Yeah, how many 2-8 teams do we have in college football that still have a plus margin in terms of their total score this season? But we do it with Arkansas, and I know one of that was against like a nondescript FCS opponent, so that inflates it. But that tells you that they've lost a lot of close games, putting aside the 6 touchdown or however many touchdown losses to Notre Dame that they got. I think Notre Dame just scored again in that one, but they've played a tougher schedule, I think, than Texas. At 10, I would maybe sponsor a small play on Arkansas, but I have no idea what I'm getting with these 2 teams here, because what is Texas now? They were number 1 in the country to start the season. And now you're 7-3 and essentially out of the playoff mix. This is an old Southwest Conference rivalry that is now a new SEC rivalry with Arkansas and Texas, because the SWC used to be all Texas schools, and then Arkansas was kind of the redheaded stepchild that was the only non-Texas school in the conference. But so there's a lot of history between these 2 teams. Nothing for me. Maybe lean over with 2 teams that kind of like obviously are disappointed with the results of this season, even though there's a disparate records between the 2. That would be probably the way I would look, but I've got nothing on this one as of now.
So I spent a lot of time in the open on Wednesday, Wes, talking about the ACC. I didn't spend too much time on the Miami and Notre Dame discussion. I'll leave that to everyone else in the sports media world to give us their thoughts and their columns on that. But what I did say is that I'm mad at Miami. And the reason is I don't want any other ACC teams in the playoff. And unfortunately, we're going to get one in the playoff. And it's probably going to be Georgia Tech, unless Pitt decides to show up down there in Atlanta. Georgia Tech gave up 537 yards last week on the ground, or not on the ground, in the game to Boston College. What do you make of this spot here? This will be a primetime game on ESPN. Georgia Tech, number 16 in the rankings, hosting Pitt fresh off of their loss against Notre Dame. But everything's still in front of the Pitt Panthers, as the Nard Dog let us know last week that the Notre Dame game didn't mean anything. Georgia Tech laying 2.5 against Pitt.
Yeah, and this obviously would send Georgia Tech to the ACC title game if they win. So I don't think they're looking ahead to Georgia. because, of course, that's a big game, and we'll have more on Georgia later in the program. But Pitt's got to win their last two. What you saw last was not really impressive by either side. You know, Pitt had College game day in there, and Notre Dame, we talked about that game last week. They absolutely trucked them. And then Georgia Tech had to come back from 11 down in the fourth quarter to beat BC. Georgia Tech, one of the top offenses in the country. And, you know, Pitt's not bad, despite what Notre Dame did to him. That's maybe a feather in Notre Dame's cap, the fact that they were able to kind of, you know, shut down Pitt, essentially. So I don't know what I want to do with this one, because both teams, I think, left you with kind of a bad impression if you're looking at last week. If you made me, I'd probably say Georgia Tech here at home, because I do think that they are just the better team. But I don't know where I want to go with this one, if anywhere. Total is very high at 62, and I think rightfully so. Maybe I'll wait to bet the under here, because maybe this starts out like a house of fire and then it's tight late. And then all of a sudden you see these teams trying to manage clock and slow down drives. So this might be like an in-game under that I'm looking for on Saturday night, because I think if this stays competitive, you're going to see the scoring kind of die in the fourth quarter.
One thing I like to point out, Wes, and our buddy Brett Ciancia does it with his game grader, which is looking at the last four games. Per Brett Ciancia's game grader over at Pick 6 Previews, Georgia Tech, number 29 amongst Power 4 teams the last four games. Pitt, number 26. Georgia Tech run defense, 66th out of 68 teams in the country from a Power 4 standpoint. But yeah, I do trust the Brent Key staff more than the Nard Dog staff, so probably would be Georgia Tech or pass for me, but no bet on this game. But we do have plenty of bets, lots of bets, and we're going to run through a ton of games, some spots where you're going to say, really? You want to bet that game? Okay, good luck. So we will get into those. Genius or jerk? That's what Youmans like to call some of these games. We'll dive into those on the other side. We got a quick break. It is the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast. All right, we're back. It is the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast. Yeah, you better get ready. Some of these bets are going to be you're going to need some manhood to take some of these bets. But before we get to those, I'm rocking my Hawaiian shirt here because Hawaii was in town this week to take on UNLV. And of course, our friends over at Rainbow Authentics have been a proud sponsor all year long, giving us some swag to give away. More on that next week. But check them out, rainbowauthentics.com. You often see me wearing my Rainbow Authentics hat. You can get the hat over there at the website. It really helps out Hawaii Athletics as they try to help out not only Hawaii Athletics and the student athletes and coaches, but also strengthen local communities and give back to Hawaii with pride. So check out everything they have to offer over at rainbowauthentics.com. And once again, mahalo to our friends, Rainbow Authentics, a proud sponsor of the podcast all year long. All right, Wes, we're going to go chronologically here with some ugly dogs, some big favorites. We're going to run through this one. I got a lot of games written down here just to give some thoughts on, and we'll start in the noon window. Big noon kickoff, Ohio State and Rutgers. Will we see Carnell Tate? Will we see Jeremiah Smith? You've got Michigan on deck. Do you dare chop some wood and take 31.5 with the Scarlet Knights?
I do dare, Tim. Reluctantly so, but I do. I took Rutgers at 32. I would take him anything over 30 here in this spot. And that's what we want to do, right, to start our Saturday before Thanksgiving is fade the best spread team and the number one ranked team in the country. But you know what? If you're in sports betting and you don't like pain, get the hell out, because you're going to have some pain in this racket. So I'm with Rutgers here. Rutgers, by the way, off a bye. Still in contention for that bowl bid. They're 5-5. We don't expect they're going to go to 6-5 this week, certainly. They have Penn State, by the way, and Piscataway to close out the season. That's the more likely 6 win for Greg Schiano's bunch. But they've had a lot of injuries this year, so I think a bye week late in the season could probably benefit these guys. Meanwhile, Ohio State, are they kind of maybe, looking to Michigan, of course, where they've lost 4 straight, by the way, to the team up north, as they call them in the great state of Ohio. And then, of course, the likely Big Ten championship game matchup with Indiana, where we could get 1 versus 2 in a conference championship game. So, would be the matchup of that weekend. But They could get looking ahead here, and we know that they can get margin on anybody. They got margin on UCLA last week. I think that touchdown late was actually what helped them cover the number in the final 2 minutes. And they had a UCLA team that was, off travel and
Nico.
And their season's been so topsy-turvy with the dismissal of Deshaun Foster. So there is a little bit of history too, by the way, between these two coaches. Because if you remember in 2018, remember when Urban Meyer got suspended for the first 3 games of the season for the thing with Smith, the allegations against him and that they mishandled it. So he was suspended for 3 games, and he had brought in Schiano to be his associate head coach. Well, who was the interim head coach on that staff? That was Ryan Day. And Ryan Day always gave Greg Schiano great credit and great praise, called him the classiest guy in the profession and whatnot. And then in 2022, they kind of got into it at the end of the game. Remember when Ohio State ran a fake punt very late in the game up a huge margin? They were up 30-something. And then the Rutgers kid late hits the punter out of bounds. And they had some words at the end. It seems like bygones are bygones, like it's no big deal. But I found that interesting. There's some history here. Ohio State, number 1 in the nation in terms of pace being slow, seconds per play. So they're not running tempo. They're not running hurry-up offense. They just gradually wear you down. But are Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith going to play here? Or do you sit them out? Is it kind of like discretion is the better part of valor, where you go ahead and okay, we've got enough to beat these guys? And if we win by the mid-20s, are we going to drop from the number 1 ranking? I don't think that they necessarily are. So I thought that this was just a little bit too high here, even though Ohio State, number 2 in the country, ATS 8-1-1. I think the Scarlet Knights compete here. I think that bye week was good for them.
Let's stay in the noon window. We'll lump these 2 ACC games together. You got 13th ranked Miami at Virginia Tech, noon on ESPN. Louisville at SMU, noon on ESPN2. Miami, I'll give them credit. I thought maybe their best performance of the season and most dominant performance was last week against NC State. Outgained the Wolfpack 581-143. You wonder, is Miami in bleep you mode? We're going to blow everyone out. We'll show you playoff committee. They're a 17.5-point favorite at Virginia Tech. It is worth noting, I don't know if anyone knows this, Virginia Tech comes out to enter Sandman. It's very daunting, and, they never lose. Oh, wait, they lose all the time at home. And then Louisville at SMU. Louisville coming off the loss to Clemson. SMU, this is a very important game for SMU, possibly to make the ACC championship. We've seen some Louisville support. I did take a little 4.5 earlier in the week at 2.5. Wouldn't be a play for me. Any thoughts on the 2 ACC games in the noon window?
Well, maybe Virginia Tech should be coming out to Metallica's Nothing Else Matters, because this season doesn't really matter anymore, as they're now 3-7. This is probably going to be the first time, though, that James Franklin is going to be introduced at Lane Stadium. Of course, James Franklin was hired earlier this week, so I'm sure he's going to get a big ovation. By the way, I do think that that's a good hire. I think that's a good match, James Franklin and Virginia Tech, just as an aside note here. I don't know if they're up to it against Miami, and the market certainly agrees. It's always dangerous to lay as a favorite with Cristobal, but it would be Miami laying 17.5 or nothing, because I do think that they're trying to go for style points and then hope for chaos in the ACC. And if any conference gives chaos in college football, it is the ACC. Nobody can stand prosperity. Every time you have, they're the team to beat, they're the favorite to win the conference, they lose. And that just happens in the ACC. So I think Miami probably rolls over the Hokies here, gets them some early gobbler for the Thanksgiving festivities with Virginia Tech. And then Louisville, SMU, nothing for me here. Louisville, tough loss to Clemson at home last Friday night. So you wonder what their psyche is going in here against SMU. I think good scoop by you, taking well over the 3 with Louisville, because I'm right at the number. I'm right at a field goal here, so nothing for me.
All right, let's get to a game. You talk about taking points with Rutgers, and that's one thing. How about taking points with Charlotte against Georgia? 12:45 SEC Network. I mentioned a stat on Wednesday's podcast. I imagine you'll mention it here. Right now, Georgia against Charlotte here in this spot is laying 44 against the 49ers.
Yeah, we go against Ohio State and go against Georgia in the early window. Man, that sounds like a fun as hell Saturday. Jesus, what the hell am I doing? But that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go against Ohio State, and I'm going to go against Georgia. Kirby Smart, this is just one of those games where, keep guys healthy, nothing really elaborate in terms of the offensive game plan. They could cover this number. Of course they could, because Charlotte's one of the worst teams in FBS, but I think it's one of those where it's like all of a sudden you're looking and it's 24-0 at the early second quarter, and it's like, oh my God, they're going to win by 60. Then they're going to go and, try to just run clock, and they're going to run the ball. You probably won't see Gunnar Stockton, I'm guessing, in the second half, maybe the first series. So there's another way to play this if you don't want to play the number with Charlotte. Play the second half under, I think, because I think that this is going to be run the ball, just get through it. Georgia's pretty secure in the college football playoff, in my opinion, but they could be a little bit, lackadaisical early. You have a short week, by the way, and they have Georgia Tech. What'd that game go? 8 overtimes last year, Tim?
7 or 8.
I think. So that's it's been one-sided for Georgia, but that's a rivalry with Georgia and Georgia Tech, and this is the best Georgia Tech team they've had down in a while in Atlanta. So I don't know. If you remember last year when they played UMass, they didn't cover against UMass. And UMass was kind of like the Charlotte of last year, where they were one of the worst teams in FBS. Still are, by the way. And I just don't think that Kirby's out to stomp and really step on the throat of Charlotte here. So give me the 49ers. I took 45. I would still take 44 here. Kirby Smart has never covered a number, by the way, of 38 or higher. I think 0-15 I read. Yep. 0-15 against the number. So give me Charlotte.
God bless you. That is...
I need all the prayers I can get or divine intervention I can get.
Earlier this year, it is worth noting, Austin Peay 28-6 final score, FCS Austin Peay, and then the season opener against Marshall 45-7. So the precedent is real in there. A team that felt snubbed on Tuesday, not Miami, someone else in the G5. They're laying a pretty big number on this weekend. We'll get into that and a bunch of other games. One more break. It is the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast. We're back. It is the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast. Just a reminder, you know the drill. If you can, rate, review, and subscribe. Here's a great talking point at Thanksgiving. Don't talk politics. Tell them about the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast and get everyone at the Thanksgiving table to subscribe and give us a 5-star review. I think that is the perfect way to start off your Thanksgiving holiday, but that's just me. Also, the best way to start it off, Wes Reynolds, is betting on James Madison, apparently, a team that had to have felt very disappointed on Tuesday. Their odds shifted from around 2-1 to 4-1 to make the college football playoff. You mentioned Miami. Maybe they're going to be in for style points. Is James Madison going to be in for style points as they play Washington State 1 p.m. Eastern on ESPN+?
Oh, I think so, Tim, considering they were up 44-3 on App State in the fourth quarter and they were still running no huddle. I think they're probably out for blood here. There's a little bit of that Cignetti remnants. There's still a couple old Coach Cignetti coaches on this staff and some players still in the program. So they're probably seeing their old boss and their old liege, at number 2 in the country with the Indiana Hoosiers, and they're probably like, we want some of that. We've got something special here in Harrisonburg, and we want to show it. And I think that they're going to show it against Washington State. Tough travel, obviously, going from Pullman to Harrisburg, Virginia. JMU, look, Alonzo Barnett III has been terrific. They still have a member, Matt Sluka as the backup, by the way, for them. So that's not necessarily, okay, the backup just hands the ball off because he is a running threat. So I think James Madison... Washington State is still a name program. I know they're this vagabond right now in the Pac-2, but I think that Washington State, because they've been close in some of these games, they were close against Ole Miss, and Ole Miss, I think, only won by 7, and also Virginia. I think that's deceiving, and I think that that's what's keeping this number a little bit under 14. This could be 17, and I'd still consider laying it with James Madison. I just don't know if Washington State, that offense is limited. Remember, last year they had Johnny Mateer and Ben Arbuckle was the offensive coordinator. Now they're both in Norman with Oklahoma. I just don't know how Washington State is going to keep up offensively here. I think that this is going to be very tough for them because James Madison may score every single time. And it is a decent number to lay. It's an early game for Wazoo because it is 10 a.m., so it's 1 Eastern there in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I like James Madison here. I think they've been a good bully so far this year, and I think they're a good bully again on Saturday.
All right, let's stay in that G5 world, and you talk about James Madison. They're trying to make a statement to make the playoff. Well, last week you wonder about South Florida losing on the road as a double-digit favorite to Navy. They really squandered their chance to make the college football playoff. Alex Golish, is his mind elsewhere right now as their chances to make the playoff have pretty much vanished? And you got this UAB team that, look, we've seen at times since they made the change at head coach firing Trent Dilfer, they won against Memphis as a massive home underdog. They've put up yards last week, even though they didn't cover against North Texas. So we've already got Rutgers and Charlotte on the ledger. I'm going to join you on this one. Are we go Blazers plus 21.5 in this spot?
We are go Blazers, and you mentioned that game last week against North Texas where they lost 53-24, didn't cover. But they were only outgained by like 28 yards. They were -4 in the turnover margin. And UAB is competing, and they're continuing to fight. Alex Mortensen, by the way, the son of the late, great Chris Mortensen, is the interim coach after Trent Dilfer was let go. And I think they've been playing hard for Alex Mortensen. I really do. And they've kept the energy, even though they've been a little bit overmatched talent-wise. South Florida, I wonder their psyche right now. They really thought that they were going to go in and kick Navy's butt last week. They were very, very overconfident. And Navy proved that, there's a reason why we win all these games in Annapolis is they were 10-point underdogs. And I eventually joined you. You actually put me onto that one. And I took Navy, and Navy ends up winning outright. So there's all kind of a mess there in the American, whereas the team that's not leading the conference is actually the highest rated, and that's Tulane at number 22. So, yeah, you could say, okay, South Florida's out to prove something, but all these other teams are as well. And I wonder if there's a little bit of hangover for South Florida where maybe UAB gets out to an early lead. This is an offense that can score, and they'll continue to chuck it around the yard with Kitna there at quarterback. So I am going with UAB. I think high-scoring game, but I think UAB just does just enough to stay in the number.
Yeah, that's going to be a hold on to your butt special, but I'm with you. I think this is a really tricky spot for South Florida. Where's their mind at? It felt like, all right, we're back in the playoff. We're good to go. And then you lose to Navy. So is this a letdown spot? I certainly think it is. Let's go to South Bend, NBC, 3:30 Eastern. Syracuse will be going with the lacrosse walk-on, Joey Filardi, at quarterback here. And Notre Dame might be looking for style points as well. How about this? The past 7 senior day games for Notre Dame, they've averaged a 34.9-point win. Last year was a 21-point win over Virginia, 38-point win over Wake in 23, 44-0 in 2022, 55-0, 45-21, 40-7, 42-13. So they have kind of dominated in these spots. And once again, you hear the whispers, and I'm sure the players do, and it's not whispers, it's a blowhorn of Notre Dame doesn't belong to be in, doesn't belong in the field. Does Notre Dame exercise those demons again this week as a 35-point favorite?
I think that they do. Now, I'm looking to play this game without laying 35 necessarily, because I think that's right at the number. Would you say the average was 34.9? Yeah, so 35 looks like the exact right number against a Syracuse team that it's all gone sideways, not only the quarterback, but switching some of the offensive staff in different positions. The receiver coach got let go a couple weeks ago. So Josh Gaddis is doing like 3 jobs on this offensive staff right now. And it's not working because you got the lacrosse bro and you had quarterback there that you mentioned, Joey Filardi, who, by the way, was a highly touted lacrosse player. So I don't mean to dismiss the young man. He's a hell of an athlete and a hell of a player, but I don't know if he's a hell of a quarterback here. Now, they're going to have to do some kind of trickery or whatnot, but they've got some of him on film because he started a couple weeks ago, or a couple games ago, the game against North Carolina. So the way I might play this, and this is a hold on to your you-know-what here as well, under team total for Syracuse at 7.5. And it is juiced because I see this being like 42 or 49-7. What was that game against Wake Forest you mentioned a few years ago, 44-0?
Yeah.
Could be that again. Total is 50.5. Boy, that makes a lot of sense to me. I don't know how Syracuse scores more than twice in this game. They might get a lucky one, because you're accounting for the fact that maybe they get like a punt return or a pick six or something like that. But under team total for the Orange on Saturday against Notre Dame.
Yeah, so 45-7 against Wake, 44-0 against Boston College.
That's right.
So, yeah, we will see how this plays out. All right, in that same window, ACC Network, what do they play for down there? Victory Bell? I think they paint it either Carolina blue or that royal blue for the winner. Duke and North Carolina. And, once again, it's the theme of this show. Hold on to your butt. I'm on UNC here. I took 7. There's still a 7 out there at Circa. I really like this North Carolina defense. Do I like their offense? Nope, I do not. However, I don't like Duke's defense. It is one of the worst in all of Power 4 football. And we're kind of at that point of the year, Wes, where you're wondering, all right, we talked about South Florida. They just squandered their chances at making the college football playoff with their loss last week. Is it a letdown spot? What about Duke? I mean, they got embarrassed last week by Virginia, and I know a lot of folks were on the Blue Devils last week. I thankfully stayed off. I just think this number's a little bit too high for this Duke team that is not all that trustworthy. I get it. UNC's offense is not very good. This UNC team plays insanely slow. So getting a full touchdown here with Chapel Bill. Look, he took in that co-ed cheerleading competition earlier this week, so his mind is clearly on this game, and he's ready to go. But I'll take the 7 with UNC here against the Blue Devils.
Yeah, I was on the wrong side last week with North Carolina at Wake Forest. And now I don't know if I was as perturbed as Bill Belichick appeared to be in the handshake with Jake Dickert, the real quick blow by there at the end when he was taking time out. And then Jake Dickert's like, okay, well, I'm going to score here at the end, even though the spread was long decided. Duke got obliterated last week by Virginia, who had a heartbreaking, crushing loss, and with the backup quarterback as well. I think they got outgained like 308-50 in the first half, and then lost 34-17. North Carolina still, if they can win their final 2, could get bowl eligible for Chapel Bill there. So there are still some 7s out there. If I play this, I'm going to take the underdog because I'm getting the points at home with the team that does have the better defense, and that is still North Carolina, despite the fact that they were a little disappointed against the run against Wake Forest last week. But I think that they could force turnovers here. Mensa can be a little turnover prone.
I'm going to have the apps all fired up. I've got a bunch of bets that are on ESPN Plus on Saturday, which nothing better than betting on ESPN, games on ESPN Plus. But both you and I have a bet on this game. East Carolina at UTSA. I'll start with your side. East Carolina still has an opportunity to win this conference. Big win last week. I was on them last week against Memphis. That was a back-and-forth game. UTSA, boy, they are Jekyll and Hyde. Away from the Alamo Dome, they are completely different. But at home, they've been pretty darn good. We're looking at a total 61.5 to 62.5 between ECU and UTSA, 3:30 ESPN Plus on Saturday.
Yeah, I was with you on East Carolina last week as they pulled it out there at the end. They can still make the AAC title game if they do win out. But they are going against a team that's 32-4 at home under this coach, Jeff Traylor, down there at UTSA. So a side would lean UTSA. I stayed out of the side, though. I think that this is going to be a shootout. I think this is going to be maybe a little bit similar to what we saw when we last saw UTSA on national TV. I think it was that Thursday night game a couple weeks ago where they did upset Tulane. So indoor track, two offenses that can move it down the field, and UTSA especially can do it at home. This did see a little bit of under money this morning, but I think it's coming back the other way. So you could still get some over 61.5, but 62 is like the consensus number. I'm still going over here with the Pirates and the Roadrunners. Me.
Yep, I'm on UTSA here. Look, we're not getting the best of the number. I took 3 earlier this week. I don't know if the points really come into play here. It's such a high total. Probably take a little money line as well on UTSA. I like taking 2.5 nowadays, just in case you get into 3 overtimes. You know you've got a winner and no craziness is going to happen there. But you mentioned it. How about Frank Wilson? 32, not Frank Wilson. Coach Traylor, excuse me. 32-4. Straight up at home since 2020, 5th best mark in the CFB, 5-1 ATS as a home dog. And the last time we saw them, they were home dogs, the Tulane, as you mentioned. And Owen McCown, 31 of 33, and 4 touchdowns in that game, 370 yards. Bowl eligibility lurking out there for the Triangle of Toughness, UTSA as well. They've got this game and then Army. So I'm on Meep Meep. I think they clear things up a little bit in the American, and I think they knock off East Carolina. Let's stay in the American. 345 ESPN U. I've bet on Temple, I believe, 4 times this year. I'm 3-1. I am not on Hoot Hoot, the Temple Owls here. You are, as they take on number 4 Tulane. 24, Tulane.
This is it, I think, for Temple in terms of potential bowl eligibility. They're 5-5. They've got 2 games left. This one and then at North Texas. I don't know if they're going to go down there to Denton County and beat those guys. Tulane, probably has something to prove in the fact that they've been getting, a little bit ripped because they were the highest group of 5 team in the rankings. And there's a lot of us that think that some other teams like James Madison and maybe even North Texas, that these teams are better than Tulane. Market has kind of gone a little bit their way. I'm even seeing some 9 out there right now, but I think that this is like back against the wall for the Temple Owls, who have done well against like the lesser competition, but when they've stepped up in class in the first year under Casey Keeler, not so much. But Tulane, just to me, they have some really erratic performance like we saw against UTSA a couple weeks ago on that Thursday night. I'm on the Owls reluctantly. Tulane can certainly, be explosive with Retzlaff, but I think that this is a little bit too much, and I think you get a spirited effort out of Temple in Philadelphia. And, weird atmosphere, obviously, going to that pro stadium where there's going to be a lot of empty seats there at the Link on Saturday. So give me Temple.
Casey Keeler's really done a good job in his first year at Temple, and an opportunity, like you said, to make a bowl game. This was on my preliminary list. Didn't bet it yet. Probably will end up on Temple there. A couple Big Ten games before we take one final break. Michigan and Maryland, Big Ten Network. We heard from Matt Youmans on Wednesday. I'll echo some of the sentiments that he had. I'm going to take the Terps here. Plus 14. There's even a 14.5 out there. I bet 14, so that'll be the official play here. Another kind of hold on to your butt special, right? In this situation. Look, Maryland, it's been a forgettable year. I know you've got their win total over. They have Michigan State on deck, which they should, in theory, win. But I think the Mike Locksley news helps out Maryland in this spot. Michigan, not a team that, has looked all that great as of late. They have Ohio State on deck. So I think this is just kind of an ugly game in College Park. So I'm going to take the points. I'm going to take the 14 with Maryland. And as I mentioned, right now, DraftKings does have this game sitting at 14.5. But let's stay in the Big Ten, and we can make it a double feature if you have thoughts on Michigan, Maryland. But Nebraska, Penn State, 7 o'clock, primetime, NBC. And what do you make of this spot here with the Corn headed to Happy Valley?
Yeah, I'm against the market here. This was actually 10, and now it's 8. And even a 7.5 popped at Circuit is now back to 8. I'm on Penn State here. I know this looks absurd. 4-6 over 7-3 Nebraska, but I think there's a reason. I don't think Nebraska can stop their run, number one. And number two, this is senior day in Happy Valley. This has been a disappointing season, but like we talked about with the Penn State-Indiana game a couple weeks ago, Penn State still has Penn State talent. in a lot of positions there. And they, credit to them for going to Michigan State, a team that also needed that win and really dominating them in the second half. They really put the game away. So I don't think Penn State has mailed the season in. I think this is the spot actually this week to bet them and to lay the number at home against Nebraska, to finally to get a Big Ten win at home, send the seniors out well. And then maybe next week at Rutgers might be the spot to go against Penn State, because you'll have two teams fighting for that bowl eligibility, more than likely at 5 and 6. So laying it with the Nittany Lions despite the market disagreement.
All right. Those are our plays. For those of you watching with us on the Fast channel, this will be the end of the road. That being said, if you're with us on YouTube or on iTunes, Spotify, we'll have one final segment. We'll do our best bet recap. A couple more bets as well from both me and Wes on that. So for Wes Reynolds, I'm Tim Murray. Thanks for watching. As I mentioned, more bonus coverage on the iTunes and Spotify podcast. All right, we're back. It is bonus time on the podcast as well as on YouTube. Do continue to hit those subscribes on YouTube. I want to get to this game. We had Joshua Nunn from the Action Network step on a Duck One on primetime earlier this week, and he brought this game up and made some really good points, and then I see that you have it as a best bet. So let's go to Baton Rouge, 7:45, SEC Network, Western Kentucky, and the Bayou Bengals. Shout out to the Van Buren boys. Put up your 8 fingers. Michael Van Buren will be the starter here, Wes. What do you make of this spot? Could this be one where LSU maybe exercises some demons?
I think so. The season finale in terms of a home game at night in Baton Rouge, which is a different atmosphere from the daytime down there, and they're getting Western Kentucky, who is 8-2 so far this year. I believe 6-1. They got a big game with Jacksonville State, by the way, next week. I don't believe Western Kentucky is already clinched to be in the Conference USA title game. I think that they're in pretty darn good shape, though. So this obviously doesn't affect that. And Newsmeyer not going to go, of course, for LSU. I think this is a game where they take out the frustration on somebody, because this has been an obviously disappointing season. Frank Wilson is the interim, by the way, who you mentioned earlier, the former UTSA coach. Frank Wilson looking for his first win as LSU interim coach. And I think the guys are going to fight for him. They probably know he's not getting the job, but it's like, hey, let's send coach out a winner here at home. And I think that this is the opportunity to do so. I think they get out on Western Kentucky, step up in class for the Hilltoppers. I think LSU rolls.
Yeah, and I think the point also that you made, Western Kentucky, they got bigger fish to fry. They'll go get their money. Charlie, come out and get your whooping type of situation. Take your loss and move on with that one. This next game, I don't have a bet, but I just wanted to mention it real quickly. Washington at UCLA. If Nico plays, which seems to be the inclination that he would, I'd be interested in the Bruins here at 10.5 against Washington. Washington, they get Oregon next week. They've got no chance of making the playoff. I think this is a tricky spot for Washington. We've seen them be a bit Jekyll and Hyde, great at home, not so much on the road. And UCLA, maybe they've just kind of fallen off since the firing and, that initial bump is kind of dissipated. But I might look UCLA here, but I need to know that Nico is in. Is this the spot at all for you, Washington at UCLA Saturday night?
Samesies for me. I would be on the Bruins or nothing. Washington, like you mentioned, on the road. They lost to a Wisconsin team a couple weeks ago, couldn't beat anybody. And then last week, they beat the absolute hell out of Purdue. So maybe you're getting a little bit of that tax here, where this would be like 9.5, but it's 10.5. So you're getting that little half point or point tax based on the disparate results from last week. So it'd be Bruins or pass here for me.
I do have a late night play, though, Wes. I am in on Utah State, +3 against Fresno. I think they win this game outright. I know Fresno State still has an opportunity to make the Mountain West Championship. I like this Utah State team. If they beat UNLV, I think this number's probably a bit shorter, and I would maybe look to fade Utah State. But, you can't put too much stock in the old 5-win trying to get the bowl eligibility, but it's year one for Bronco Mendenhall. I think Fresno State, when you look at them offensively, it's really nothing to write home about. I think you're going to get a really good effort from Utah State. Bryson Barnes has done a good job at the quarterback position. They missed 2 field goals that would have won them the game last week at UNLV, end of regulation, and then at the end of the first overtime. I like Utah State, 10:30 Eastern, CBS Sports Network. I took 3. I'll also take some money line here. I think the Aggies get a win here, and I think they get bowl eligible in Fresno on Saturday night.
Yeah, Fresno to me, they did get the win and cover against Wyoming, but a lot of that was Wyoming's just anemic offense. Like they couldn't do anything. They couldn't stay out of their own way. I felt that they kept Fresno relatively at bay, but just got worn out because the defense was on the field all the time. I'm not that high on that Fresno team, so I'd be on the Aggies or nothing in this one.
And then Friday night, Wes, here in our backyard, Allegiant Stadium, Hawaii and UNLV. I will be there. Will you be at the game?
As of now, no. I don't know. That's kind of maybe a last-minute decision, but I don't know. But I'll be monitoring it for sure.
A fun one, no doubt. We've got a total of 64. We also have a spread of 3. And as always, our Hawaii games, are brought to you by our friends at Nahoku, Hawaii's finest jewelers since 1924. For nearly 100 years, Nahoku has been sharing the spirit of aloha through an incomparable collection of Hawaiian and island lifestyle jewelries. Each piece is inspired by the beauty and traditions of the islands, crafted by Hawaiian gold, beautiful pearls, and rare gemstones. Also, they've got locations all across the country, not just on the island. So you could check them out in California, where they've got 7 locations, in Texas, in Illinois, in New England, in the D.C. area, down in Florida as well. So check them out, nahoku.com, nahoku.com. Christmas time right around the corner. Could be a great little piece for the loved one in your life. I like Hawaii here. Not a shock, as people have watched this podcast. You know I'm in on the Rainbow Warriors. I think this UNLV team has been flirting with fire quite a bit here this year, Wes. I love the offense right now for Micah Alahado and the pieces they have there. Jackson Harris has 10 touchdown receptions. Pefeli Ashlock has been awesome. They're healthy. They're coming off a bye. Fast track, no weather involved. I do lean over in this game as well because I do think UNLV will have some success. Anthony Calandria has really been impressive this year, the Virginia transfer. He's a dual threat. He can run a little bit. So I think he'll give this Hawaii defense some fits as well. I also think it'll be a great live betting game, Wes, because this game should be up and down. It is funny to note that the 2 games that are going to take place at Allegiant Stadium this weekend, one has a total of 64, one has a total of 36 in the Browns and Raiders. FS1 Friday night, Hawaii +3 will be a best bet for me in this game. Anything for you on the Friday night special?
Yeah, I think wrong team favored here. Absolutely. I think UNLV, Dan Mullen's done a good job with these guys, but they've gotten very lucky in several games, including last week in that double overtime game against Utah State where the Rebels got the win. Give me Hawaii. I think that they've been playing just better, cleaner football over the last few weeks after a real rough spot early in the season. So I think our friends from the islands are going to be very, very happy leaving on that Hawaiian Airlines flight back to the islands as they get the win here in Las Vegas.
Pull out the mini helmet for the Hawaii game. All right, that's going to do it for the podcast. But before we get out of here, let's get a little business done with. Let's get to our best bet recap.
Best Bets Recap.
All right, Mr. Reynolds, roll through your plays. You've got plenty of them, so hit us with your official plays for Week 13.
Yeah, and we will start out with Rutgers, +32 at Ohio State. Charlotte, I took 45, would still take 44 at Georgia. James Madison, -13.5 over Washington State. UAB, +22.5 over South Florida. Syracuse, team total under 7.5 at Notre Dame in South Bend. East Carolina, UTSA, over 61.5. Temple, +8.5, 9 in the market either way. Penn State, -8 over Nebraska. And LSU, -21.5 over Western Kentucky.
All right, there they are from Wes. I'll run through mine. A 4-3 week last week. We're 40, 36-3 on the podcast. Hopefully we can keep the momentum rolling. 10-3 the last 2 weeks. We'll go Hawaii +3 on Friday night. A little sprinkle on the money line as well. UNC +7 against Duke. Missouri +8 against Oklahoma. Utah State late night +3 against Fresno State. UTSA, don't love it at 2.5. Still an official play. A little money line play as well. Wes and I rolling with UAB, the Blazers +21.5. And I'll also take Maryland +14 against Michigan. And before we get out of here, Matt Youmans, of course, he taped his portion of the podcast on Wednesday to recap his best bets. Hawaii +3, over 64.5 in Hawaii UNLV. He's on Maryland as well, +14. He's on Florida, like Wes, +4. He's on Stanford in the big game, +3. And he's also on Utah State, +3. Matt has been rolling as well. Had a 5-1 week last week. All right, Wes, that's going to do it. Much appreciated to you for stepping up this week and stepping on this Thursday podcast. Thanks to Wyatt Tomchek and Ryan Hunter, our producers of the podcasts. Looking forward to another busy week. We'll be back next week. We'll have an episode on Monday, probably Wednesday as well, as we head into the Thanksgiving holiday. But for Wes Reynolds, I'm Tim Murray. This has been the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast.